Imagine if that head trash was not there. Who would you be? What if I told you those fears were no longer a problem? What would you do? I'm Stephanie Costello, a mom of 3, wife, and avid mountaineer. Beyond all of these, I am very much like you, an average person trying to navigate this thing we call life. My goal with this podcast is to bring to light the truth about what intimacy really is. You may smile, feel called out, or learn something new. Either way, you will learn you are in control. This episode is brought to you by Safety in Freedom. Are you struggling to find safety in the freedom you create? Or maybe you're struggling to own your power, embrace who you are, and break free from those toxic patterns? Well, let's help you solve this problem today. Let's figure out what is really happening in your relationships with yourself and others. You can do that for free today at safetyinfreedom.com/call. That is safetyinfreedom.com/call. In addition, if you are looking for support with what we've been talking about in today's episode, I want to encourage you to get our free tools to help you navigate your freedom. You can go now to safetyinfreedom.com to get those resources. If you'd like access to the special resources and all the show notes for this special episode, make sure to visit theintimacykruths.com. Today, I have the pleasure of introducing to you Christina and Hillary. Christina is a licensed clinical mental health counselor providing online therapy for adults in New Hampshire and Florida. She specializes in working with type A high achievers who struggle with anxiety, imposter syndrome, people-pleasing, and burnout. Her experience in fitness and as a former health coach has also given her a passion for helping women who struggle with disordered eating and body image. Christina co-runs the Mental Health Matters podcast with Hillary, a podcast that discusses all things mental health and wellness. Hillary has been a counselor in the mental health field for over a decade and is in the middle of obtaining her master's in clinical mental health counseling at Southern New Hampshire University. She is a certified yoga teacher, certified health coach through the American Council on Exercise, and is a dedicated advocate for mental health awareness and support. Her work includes counseling adults through trauma, addiction, grief, loss, and navigating through all of life's transitions and challenges. As a former lifeguard and surfer, Hillary believes there is nothing more therapeutic than a warm day at the beach, unless it is in a dance studio, as Hillary has been a dancer since the age of 3, and you can find her dancing her heart out every week. Her passion for accessibility to conversations about mental health support was the driving force behind her creating the Mental Health Podcast with Christina. Everyone deserves to be heard and to know they are not alone in this world. All right. Welcome back to the Intimacy Truth Podcast, where we have Christina and Hillary, 2 amazing women who are on their journey of working with people in the same similar fashion as I do. And so today we're going to talk about start before you're ready. So thank you, ladies, for being here.
Thanks for having us.
You are very welcome. This is a first for me, interviewing 2 people at the same time on my podcast. But
yeah, so there might be a little overlap.
And then for the both of you did such a seamless job with interviewing me the other day, which is very exciting to be talking about and doing. You did such a great job with balancing it so that there was not so much overlap. So hopefully I can do the same today. And so we're going to talk a lot about your podcast and your journey with becoming podcasters. But before we get to the Mental Health Matters podcast that you both created together, how about you share a little bit of each of your journeys before you came to that and how you met each other and what your life has looked like before just starting before you're ready?
Who should start?
Go for it, Christina.
All right, cool. So I'm a licensed mental health counselor in the state of New Hampshire. I provide online therapy for New Hampshire, but also for Florida. And my journey started with just my own navigation through some trauma, through my own mental health stuff. And I knew that I always wanted to help people. I just didn't know in what capacity. So I was kind of all over the place with my career journey, did some health coaching, life coaching, and ultimately it brought me back full circle to therapy. And so I recently opened my private practice. And while I was doing that, Hillary reached out to me and was interested in starting a podcast, which she can share more about like where that came from. But I was like, yeah, this is perfect timing because I'm starting my business. And this is obviously an important area that we both love to talk about. Hillary and I connected about 3, maybe 4 years ago at this point.
Yeah, going on 4, I think.
Yeah. Wow, that's crazy. At a networking business personal development conference, and we met then and connected, but didn't really get too in depth with anything. And then we just stayed in touch throughout the years, and then we just decided to go for it and start a podcast. So that's what brought us here.
I love it. Go for it, Hillary.
Hi, everyone. So I'm Hillary, and I'm also a counselor. I'm actually in my second year of my graduate program to eventually become a licensed LMHC. So I'm on that journey myself. And I've been in the field in some capacity for over 10 years, working with women, adults, men, no children, but just adults really, in all different capacities. So shelters, inpatient psych units, hospice, addiction counseling. So there's been a whole different array of avenues I've gone with counseling. And currently I'm in grief and loss counseling. That's what I do right now, my day job. And other than grad school, of course.
Yeah.
Christina and I met at, like she had said, a personal development sort of coaching, networking event, probably about 3 or 4 years ago now. And, we stayed in touch. And when I was working at the inpatient unit, I was just sitting there one day and I just kept thinking about how it's such an important conversation to have, mental health. Just it matters so much. It's so prevalent. It's so important in our lives. And I was like, I really want to start a podcast. I could like feel it, like the fire in my bones. And I listen to podcasts every day myself. It's one of my biggest coping skills for the start of my day. And I've always been super inspired by them. And I was like, I want to do that too, And I just thought, who would be a great co-host, like co-pilot for this, to like create this magic. And I thought of Christina. And that's how we started.
It was just so serendipitous, the timing, and I love podcasts too, but Hillary and I really had no idea where to start. We had these great ideas, but we were just kind of overwhelmed as far as navigating this new area. But I think it's come together. So.
Yes, for sure. As my business mentor would call it, all the bells and whistles that everyone sells you, and you need all these crazy things for all this marketing and to be successful. And right, it's there's like, you Google how to start a podcast and you get all of these flooded things, and then they now can reach you through their ads and on your personal platforms and all that other stuff. So it can be very overwhelming. So when we talk about just starting or start before you're ready, what does that look like? So how did you start? What are some of the first things that you decided to do in order to get started?
I think we were trying to figure out first, like how this partnership would go, because Hillary and I really didn't know each other that well. We knew we were very like-minded and had similar visions and goals, but we didn't know who would do what. And so we tried to play on each other's strengths a little bit, but also acknowledging our vulnerabilities too. And I think we've navigated that pretty well, but obviously we're still learning and still growing and developing. But I think one of the real key things was to focus on the message and takeaways for people, and the rest would come as far as like navigating the whole tech and I don't know, behind the scenes side of it.
Yeah, that's really what held us back, I think, or myself at least, to begin, because this thought had always been in my head for the past 3 years, to start this podcast, but I just kind of sat on it, being a little intimidated by the whole process. And so that's a great message to your audience today, is that, you know, you may not know where you're going or like how to begin, but if you have the passion and you have the message, like Christina said, which is really our focus, and your heart is in it, you almost can't fail, right? Because you're, maybe even if one person ever listens, that one person listened, right? So you're getting a message across to somebody.
Yes,
I think Hillary and I too, being like clinicians, we like to reframe these ideas of failure and embrace failure, and what does failure teach us? What are lessons that we can learn? And so, you know, I think though, because the messages are so important and this is something we're really passionate about, I think that that could have been an opportunity for us to not go for it because of that perfectionism of it needs to be great in order for people to take something away, but that wasn't the case and hasn't been the case. But you learn that too as you go.
It's so true. There's two pieces to this that I want to bring us back to. Knowing what your message is, what your passion is, and having your heart in it. If you have that inspiration, I think we talked about on our podcast recording the difference between inspiration and motivation, how motivation is fed by fear. In my opinion, inspiration is this fire that's lit underneath you that you can feel within, and you can feel the difference between trying to motivate yourself to get yourself to do something and feeling inspired to do something. Usually when you feel inspired, you go about this huge grin on your face because you're so passionate and excited about doing it. And then going back to, you were talking about being intimidated. It's definitely very challenging when there's so many bells and whistles and you see someone doing something and you see somebody else doing something and you like a little bit of each one, but you're not sure what it is, and how to overcome that feeling of being intimidated and overwhelmed by the plethora of decisions. One of the best things that was ever taught to me about starting something, two things actually, two different people, two different times. My mentor of mine that I worked with, her name is Heather Chauvine. She said, all you need, she has headphones with the microphone on it, the iPhone microphone, and her phone. She's like, and I hold the microphone in my face and I record to my phone and I send the audio and they fix it up and there we have it. We have a podcast, right? I think she edited her podcast in the beginning. And then my husband, one time I was on this program with working out and it had this sheet and it was like Monday through Saturday or something. And it had to start on Monday. So I started on Monday and then Wednesday I forgot. So it's like, but I have to start on Monday. I can't not start on Monday. The sheet says Monday, right? Like very specific and not flexible. And he's like, why not just change the sheet to starting on Wednesday and start over? I'm like, genius, like mind blown. It was just this so obnoxious moment of like, okay, you're right. It doesn't have to be a certain way. I don't have to have this image in my head of what I expect something to be and what I expect it to turn into. And oftentimes we perceive other people to be a certain way, but the way that we perceiving them to be is through our own lens, not necessarily through the lens that they're actually experiencing. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on how you helped yourself overcome that feeling of intimidation and how to see yourself through your own lens rather than through all of the lenses that you were looking at for other people in their podcasts.
So because I do listen to so many podcasts, it kind of helped me to continue to listen. And the more I got to know these people or personalities, or I guess how I perceive them, they were so transparent. And that's really what I enjoyed about the people that I listen to, is that they're so open and they're so, you should listen to my first podcast. Oh my gosh, you know, and they joke about it and they talk about the growth. They talk about the process, which I really appreciate because no one starts there, like where they're at now, you know, years and years later, where they're like sponsored and they have the ads and they're making, you know, they have this audience and, you know, you really have to work at that. And, you know, they said like I started in my closet with a microphone because it's like the only quiet place in my house, right? Or something like that.
Right.
So yeah. So it's just, that was inspiration for me. And that was motivation for me to sort of be like, okay, everyone starts somewhere. even the people with these huge podcasts, like the top 10 on Apple or whatever have you. So that helped. And then just knowing how much I looked up to them and how much I viewed them as sort of like this, as we do with other people's, put them on a pedestal, right? Of knowing all and having all the skills and all the networking, and seeing how I saw them like that, I sort of allowed myself a break of, I'm allowed to be human and so are they, and that's the way that goes. To this day, they still have errors or they still have mess ups and they laugh it off. And we're all just human navigating this whole life thing, right?
Yes, for sure. One of the things I love to say about the podcast is it's kind of like my journal. It's episode after episode after episode of my children being able to go watch for years on end, because don't ever plan to quit. They'll get to see my evolution. They'll get to see my growth. They'll get to actually hear my true story that we hide from them now, because they're 7, 5.5, and 3. So some of my story is not some of the story that they need to or should hear at this point in their life. But when they're ready to learn more, they get to go back and they get to see the things I've shared in other people's podcasts, the things that people have shared with me. And they have a platform of journals for, instead of handwriting and reading my journals, like people used to do back in the day, which wasn't that far a long time ago. They get to watch and hear my voice, and that keeps me alive for them, in my opinion. And hopefully that's a blessing that they're excited to have when they get older. And I also wanted to comment on the thing about starting before you're ready. Babies don't think about how to crawl or plan what they should do to crawl. They don't sit and overanalyze and get stuck in analysis by paralysis. They practice and they bounce back and forth until they finally get to the point where, like, oh, right, my knees go underneath me, and so on and so forth, right? Then they learn how to walk and they fall. And sometimes they might fall and hit their head pretty hard, but they don't not get up and walk again, right? And that's something that I really love to bring to light for people when they're thinking about starting something new. There's this process and evolution of practicing, and there's really no getting to a certain destination. There's milestones, right? And those milestones we absolutely want to celebrate. But normally there's a milestone that we have ideas where we feel like we never would have got to that milestone. Now all of a sudden we're thinking about the next milestone and planning for the next milestone and trying to get there. So being messy, just allowing it to be messy, allowing it to be different or difficult or learning. So I'd love to hear, Christina, your thoughts on you talked about failing is not failing, essentially. I'm kind of paraphrasing there. Can you help our listeners understand how failing is not failing, and what is failing actually, and how to embody that internally for the journey, whatever journey they might be on that they're looking to achieve?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just about changing that narrative around what failure means. And in our society, that could mean a lot of different things. But for you personally, what does that mean for you? And trying to change that narrative, because in my opinion, in my eyes, failure is the lack of trying and not doing anything. Like, if you're trying and you're taking action, you can't fail, because again, you're learning, you're growing, you're changing, you're adapting, you're building your resiliency. Like, you're building all these strengths and tools. Like, you can't fail. And so just reframing, challenging that idea of what failure means for you as an individual. And then I always encourage clients to just start before they're ready. This is what we're talking about. Just take action, take a baby step in the direction you want to go, regardless of the outcomes, because we have no control over those. I tell my clients all the time, like, you could do all the right, quote unquote, right things, take all the necessary steps, and the outcome still not be what you want it to be. So are you going to say you failed because you did all those things? No, you're not, or you shouldn't anyway.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I don't know if that answers your question,
absolutely.
but
it totally does.
And I think that's something Hillary and I have adopted. And I think that's a great modeling example for listeners, clients that, we started before we were ready. We started without knowing anything about how to start a podcast, and we're doing it, and people are still listening. So that says something, right?
Yeah.
But it's not perfect. It's messy. We have no overhead. We're doing this all on our own. It's not all the bells and whistles. But does that really matter? No. Could it be better? Sure. But it's better than nothing.
Yeah, totally. And you actually gave me another thing to think about and talk about, which, Hillary, I'm curious your perspective on this. How do you help clients focusing on what they can control and let go of the things that they can't control?
Yeah. Yeah, that saying of we can't control how others react. We can only control how we respond to that, or how we react. So I always bring that up with clients too, is that we only have control over kind of like our bubble, so to speak, and the ripple effect, whatever that might be. Again, we can only control our reaction to that. So yeah, just showing up as your best self is all you can do.
So true. And is that sort of the mental health matters? That's a very overall theme, right? So what is your core messaging in that mental health matters piece?
With the mental health matters title, the idea behind that is a sort of like dual thought process, because mental health matters. So the things that we talk about having to do with mental health, so literally like matters, subject matters, if you will.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's like a dual meaning. And then mental health matters. It matters. It's huge. So that's sort of
So powerful.
a little bit of a duality there.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
love it.
Our goal was to start a conversation and just have this conversation be more open, more comfortable for people to have a dialogue between each other on certain topics. I mean, there's so much that we want to cover and that we can cover. But Hillary and I aren't experts in everything, and that's why we bring on people too, and also for others' perspectives. Because again, we don't know everything, and not that we should know everything. But it's just helpful to start the conversation and see where it can go. So that was really like our goal and our overall message, that your mental health matters. Let's talk about it. Here are the things we can talk about, or, invite you to talk about. And hopefully people take that and share that and run with it.
Absolutely, super powerful. And to even take it a step further, starting before you're ready. Sometimes when you start before you're ready, there can be this sense of scarcity or this feeling of lack. I know I have felt it, especially when I first started in my journey as an advisor, because not being a licensed clinician, you do have a little bit harder of a time with advertising yourself or getting your services out there, because I can't market myself on things like Psychology Today and so on. And so there's this like I want to work with others. I want to help others. I'm such an inclusive, love helping, love having. I don't have this lack mentality or this lack mindset. When I feel that sense of lack, it feels so icky and gross. And now that I don't have it anymore, now that I've overcome that and really feel confident in myself, having the two of you on doesn't scare me. It's not like, oh no, they're going to steal my clients. Like, there's no mindset about that, right? But there was in the beginning, and it was messy. There was this scarcity, this lack, I have a family to feed, and how am I going to make this happen? And to be in alignment with all of my desire to, bring things to the world. So my point in sharing that is we all have our head trash. We all have our challenges. We all have our potential hiccups or things that we're afraid of getting in our way of success. And it's what we do with it that matters to get to that, right? To help that mental health part of it, that head trash piece of it, what we do with it really does matter. How we handle it really does matter. And I chose to handle it by having people on and by just sharing my message and my passion for intimacy with the world. So I want to thank both of you ladies for being on our Intimacy Truth podcast today. Some people are like, what does this have to do with intimacy? having intimate conversations and sharing vulnerability is really important. We just had an emotionally intelligent and experiential, intimate conversation, right? So those are 3 ways that you can bond with humans. And I love showing that to people. I love offering that to people. So vulnerable and trusting that I overcame some fears, right? Like there's so much that's in all of that. So thank you for sharing your journey with me and our listeners. And if you'd like to, either both of you can share, one, how people can find you both on the podcast, and then if you have a website or anything you want to share too would be helpful. Sure. Go for it, Christina.
I know we need those cues sometimes.
It's okay.
Just stare at each other.
I saw Hillary look at you, so I was like, okay, Christina, go.
So you can find me on my website, christinaandabby.com, or Instagram at Christina Counsels. And then our podcast, Mental Health Matters. This is one thing I wanted to mention too, was that comparisonitis and, that scarcity mindset. There are a bunch of podcasts with our name. So like, again, we're having to kind of weed through this saturated area that people are talking about mental health in podcasts. So what? That's okay. That's great. Like there's plenty to go around, and we each have different perspectives and opinions and worldviews on certain topics. So it's okay. It's okay if there's a million other people doing what you want to do. Do it anyway, because it's different. So I did want to just say that. So
Sure.
Mental Health Matters podcast, there's a bunch of them out there, but you'll see a picture of Hillary and I. So that's the one.
I love it.
Very good tip. I love that. So I can be found on Instagram as well at Hillary Coughlin. And of course, the podcast Mental Health Matters, we're easily found on Spotify with that photo of us. Also, if you type in our names after Mental Health Matters, that helps as well to find us quickly. And also just a little tidbit too that I wanted to add is another mission or message that we really felt passionate about in starting this podcast before we were ready is that we wanted to really make sure that people knew that they weren't alone. So that was really important to us, to just, because I think podcasts can be so magical where you're just having this voice that resonates with you, the message, the delivery, the connection. And that's what we wanted to bring to people. And we wanted people to be like, oh, that's exactly how I was feeling today. Like, and it just brightens their day and it makes them feel connected.
Yes, I love it. Thank you for sharing, and thank you both for being.
Thank you.
Thank you.